The United Earth Coalition vessel Resolute was floating through the empty darkness of the Kepler sector, and Captain David Park was sitting in his command chair, feeling bored because nothing exciting had happened in 3 weeks of patrol duty. He picked up his coffee cup and took a long sip while watching his crew go through their daily routines, and everything seemed perfectly normal on this ordinary Tuesday morning in deep space. Lieutenant James Lee was checking his sensor console when he noticed something strange appearing on his screen, and his eyes went wide as the numbers kept climbing higher and higher. "Captain, we have multiple hyperspace signatures forming directly ahead of us," Lieutenant Lee said, and his voice cracked a little because he had never seen readings like this before. Captain Park set down his coffee and leaned forward in his chair because any activity in this remote sector was unusual, and multiple signatures meant something big was happening. "How many are we talking about?" Captain Park asked. 12, sir, and they are massive," Lieutenant Lee replied while staring at his console in disbelief. Admiral Grace Kim was in her private quarters, reviewing boring supply reports when the red alert started flashing, and she immediately jumped up and headed for the bridge because she had not become an admiral by ignoring emergencies. She arrived just as the first alien ship burst out of hyperspace, and the sight of it made her stop in her tracks because it was the largest vessel she had ever seen. The alien ship was covered in weapons that glowed purple and pulsed like a beating heart, and it looked like something designed to terrify anyone who saw it. 11 more ships, just like it, appeared behind them. First one, and together they formed a wall of metal and firepower that blocked out the stars. Ensign Emily Cho reported that she was receiving a transmission from the lead ship, and Captain Park told her to put it on the main screen. The alien that appeared had 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern, and scales that changed colors as it spoke, and a mouth full of sharp teeth that looked very dangerous. "I am High Commander Thelvox of the glorious Velthary Empire," the alien announced in a deep, rumbling voice that echoed through the bridge. "You have entered space claimed by the Velthary Empire, and you will surrender immediately or be destroyed without mercy." Admiral Kim stepped forward to respond, but then she noticed something strange happening around her. Lieutenant Lee was shaking at his console, but he was not shaking from fear, and his face was turning red as he tried to hold something back. She looked around and saw Ensign Cho biting her lip and Chief Engineer Michael Yoon covering his mouth, and even the serious tactical officer Rachel Han was starting to smile. Lieutenant Lee lost control first and let out a loud snort, followed by uncontrollable laughter that filled the bridge. Once he started laughing, it spread like a disease, and soon Ensign Cho was giggling, and Chief Engineer Yoon was laughing deeply, and the whole bridge crew was falling apart. High Commander Thelvox stared at his screen in complete confusion because in his 1,200 years of military service, no species had ever laughed at the Velthary Empire. Captain Park tried to stop himself, but every time he looked at the alien commander with his serious, threatening face, he started laughing all over again. "You dare to mock the Velthary Empire?" High Commander Thelvox roared, and his scales turned dark red with anger. "We have conquered 3,000 star systems," he shouted, "and we have crushed civilizations older than your species, and you laugh at us." Admiral Kim finally managed to compose herself and stepped forward to address the alien. "Apologize for my crew," she said in a steady voice, even though she wanted to laugh too, "and I assure you we take your threats very seriously." But Lieutenant Lee snorted again behind her, and Ensign Cho had to leave her station because she was laughing too hard to work. High Commander Thelvox demanded to know what was so funny about the mighty Velthary Empire. Captain Park wiped tears from his eyes and tried to explain. "High Commander," he said, while his voice kept breaking with laughter, "we scanned your ships when they arrived." "So what?" High Commander Thelvox demanded angrily. "Well, sir," Captain Park continued with a huge grin spreading across his face, "your weapons appeared to be plasma-based technology that we stopped using about 200 years ago." Chief Engineer Yoon added that the Velthary engines were even older, and human garbage ships could outrun their fastest warships. High Commander Thelvox went silent as his 4 eyes blinked. Rapidly trying to understand what these humans were saying, Lieutenant Lee pulled up scan data on the main screen, showing that Valkyrie shields could not even detect human weapons, and their most powerful battleship had less computing power than... A human toy. Admiral Kim watched as the truth slowly hit High Commander Thelvox, and she almost felt bad for him because his entire understanding of the universe was falling apart. The Valkyrie had ruled their part of the galaxy for 12,000 years and never met anyone more advanced, and the idea that these newcomers from a small planet could be centuries ahead was impossible for him to accept. "I think we should start this conversation over," Admiral Kim said kindly, because she understood. "This must be very hard for the alien commander. Maybe we could meet in person and talk as equals instead of conqueror and conquered." Commander Thelvox stared at her for a long moment and then did something no Valkyrie commander had ever done. In history, he ended the transmission without saying another word. The bridge of the Resolute exploded with laughter again, and this time Admiral Kim joined them because the whole situation was just too ridiculous. Lieutenant Lee was doubled over it. His console and Ensign Cho had tears running down her face, and even the security officers were chuckling. "Can you believe that?" Captain Park said between laughs. "They actually thought they could conquer us with antique weapons." Chief Engineer Yoon pulled up more detailed scans on his console and shook his head in amazement. "Their technology is so old," he said. "That I learned about it in history class as an example of what not to do." Tactical Officer Han ran some quick calculations and reported that the entire Valkyrie fleet could be disabled in under 4 minutes without any human ship taking a single hit. Admiral Kim finally got control of herself and started thinking about what this all meant. For 300 years, humanity had wondered what they would find in the stars, and they had always assumed any ancient alien empire would be far more advanced. Instead, they had found a civilization that had stopped growing thousands of years ago, while humanity had never stopped pushing forward. "This changes everything," she said quietly while looking out at the alien fleet that suddenly seemed much less threatening. "We need to contact Earth Command and figure out what to do next." Captain Park nodded and started giving orders to his crew, who were finally calming down from their laughing fit. But even as they got back to work, everyone on the bridge kept glancing at the view screen where the Valkyrie ships floated in silence. Somewhere on the lead ship, High Commander Thelvox was probably trying to figure out how to explain to his emperor that the mighty Valkyrie Empire had just been laughed at by a bunch of newcomers, and that thought made Lieutenant Lee start chuckling all over again. 3 days after the strange first contact with the Valkyrie Empire, Admiral Grace Kim called a big meeting at Earth Station Prometheus to figure out what humanity had learned about their new alien neighbors. The station was the largest thing humans had ever built, and it floated above Earth like a giant silver ring, and inside its walls, the smartest people in human civilization had gathered to study the alien threat. But the more they studied, the less threatening it seemed. Chief Engineer Michael Yoon stood in front of a huge holographic display showing detailed pictures of the Valkyrie warships, and the people watching him looked confused and amused at the same time. "Let me start with their weapons," Chief Engineer Yoon said while pulling up a picture of a Valkyrie plasma cannon. "This is their main gun," he explained, "and it shoots hot plasma at about 12 kilometers per second, which sounds fast until you know that our defense systems can stop things moving 50 times faster." People in the crowd started smiling and whispering to each other. "Their backup weapons are even worse." Chief Engineer Yoon continued, showing a picture of something the Valkyrie called a devastator beam that turned out to be about as powerful as the lasers humans used to cut rocks in mining operations. Dr. Thomas Shin, the head scientist, stood up to share what his team had found, and he was clearly trying hard not to laugh. "We looked at their shield technology," he said, "and it uses a method that humanity discovered and threw away about 230 years ago." He explained that Valkyrie shields made a simple energy wall around their ships, which worked fine against slow weapons, but was completely useless against anything modern. Humans had built their shields cannot even see our weapons, Doctor Shin said, which means we could shoot right through them and they would not know they were being attacked until their ships started blowing up. Tactical Officer Rachel Han went next, and she had spent 3 days running fake battles on computers to see what would happen if humans and Valkyrie actually fought. I ran 1,000 pretend battles between our ships and theirs, she reported. And we won every single one without losing anybody. She waited for that to sink in before continuing. Most battles lasted less than 4 minutes, and the Valkyrie never hit us once because their targeting systems are too slow and their weapons cannot hurt our armor anyway. Admiral Kim listened to all of this, feeling relieved but also very confused because humans had always expected ancient alien empires to be super advanced. How did this happen? She asked Dr. Shin, who had been working on that exact question. Dr. Shin showed everyone a history chart his team had made using information they grabbed from Valkyrie broadcasts. The Valkyrie figured out space travel about 14,000 years ago, he explained, and back then they were about as smart as humans. But something changed, he continued, and they never met anyone who could fight back, so they never needed to get better. Without competition, they stopped trying, and without trying, they stopped growing. And their technology today is basically the same as it was 10,000 years ago. He showed a graph of Valkyrie progress that went up sharply for 4,000 years, and then became a flat line that never moved again. Humans were different, he said, because we spent those same centuries fighting each other and competing for everything, and always trying to make things better. He showed another graph for human progress that started slow, but then curved sharply upward in recent centuries as humans reached for the stars. We learned faster than light travel 300 years ago, Dr. Shin said. And in that time we have improved more than the Valkyrie did in 14,000 years. Chief Engineer Yoon added that human ships were not just faster and stronger, but also smarter and easier to fix. Their engineering is clumsy, he said, and they use big, ugly solutions where we use clever designs, and they waste huge amounts of power doing things we can do with almost nothing. A young officer named Kevin Moon raised his hand and asked what everyone was thinking. So, what do we do now? He asked because the situation was so weird that nobody knew how to handle it. Admiral Kim stood up and looked around at all her officers and scientists. Valkyrie had threatened to destroy humanity and enslave everyone, and normally that would mean war. But what was the point of fighting someone who was not actually dangerous? We could destroy them completely. Captain David Park said from the back of the room in a calm voice. We could wipe out their whole fleet in hours and then attack their home planet and end their empire forever. He continued, and they would never understand what was happening. Room got quiet as everyone thought about this idea, and Admiral Kim knew some of them liked it because the Valkyrie had conquered thousands of worlds and hurt countless people. But that is not who we are, she said firmly, because she had already made up her mind. The Valkyrie are not actually a danger to us, she explained, and killing them would not make us safer, it would just make us murderers. She looked around and saw most of her officers agreed, even if some looked disappointed. We will give them a choice, she said, and show them what we can really do and let them decide if they want to be enemies or friends. What if they pick enemies, Captain Park asked. Then we defend ourselves, Admiral Kim answered, but we do not attack first, and we do not become conquerors ourselves. The meeting ended with a plan to send a peace mission to the Valkyrie homeworld, and Ambassador Daniel Kang was chosen to lead it because he was good at making people laugh, even when talking about serious things. As everyone left the room, Dr. Shin stayed behind to talk to Admiral Kim alone. Do you think they will accept our offer? He asked. Admiral Kim looked out the window at the stars and thought about all the species the Valkyrie had heard over thousands of years. I think they will have no choice, she said. And when they see how far behind they really are, they will either change or they will fade away. Paused. And added with a small smile, either way humanity will be there to watch. Dr. Shin nodded and left her alone with her thoughts, Admiral. Kim stayed at the window for a long time, watching the stars and wondering what the future would bring. 300 years ago, humans had dreamed of meeting wise ancient aliens who would teach them the secrets of the universe instead. They had found a stagnant empire that had forgotten how to grow. It was funny in a sad kind of way, but it was also an opportunity. Because if the Velthari could learn to change, then maybe the whole galaxy could become something better. And if they refused to change, then humanity would just have to show them what happened to empires that stood in the way of progress either way. The galaxy was about to get very interesting. Emperor Valdrix the Eternal sat on his crystal throne in the middle of the Imperial Palace on the Velthari home world, and he was very, very angry. The throne room was huge with ceilings so high they disappeared into darkness and the walls were covered with skulls from species the Velthari had conquered over thousands of years. For 12,000 years, his family had ruled the galaxy, and nobody had ever dared to challenge them. Until now, High Commander Thelvox was kneeling on the floor with his head down, and his scales had turned pale gray, which meant he was feeling great shame. "Tell me again what happened, Emperor." Valdrix demanded in a voice that echoed like thunder. "The humans did not react the way we expected, Your Majesty High Commander." Thelvox whispered because he knew his life might depend on his words. "They laughed at us," he continued, "and they showed us information saying our technology was weak, and then they left before we could do anything." Emperor Valdrix felt his scales turn red with rage because nobody had ever laughed at the Velthari Empire before you. "Want me to believe," he said in a cold, dangerous voice, "that creatures who only learned space travel 300 years ago are stronger than an empire that has ruled for thousands of years?" High Commander Thelvox did not answer because he had spent 3 days looking at the same information, and he had reached the same terrible conclusion the humans had shared. The Emperor turned to his advisors who were standing nervously near the throne and demanded they explain how this could happen. The advisors looked at each other with fear in their 4 eyes because nobody wanted to give the Emperor bad news. Finally, an old advisor named Counselor Morax stepped forward and spoke in a shaky voice. "Your Majesty," he began while choosing his words very carefully, "is possible we did not have complete information about the humans, and we may have guessed wrong about how strong they are." Emperor Valdrix leaned forward, and his 4 eyes got narrow and dangerous. "Are you telling me," he said slowly, "that my empire, which has conquered 3,000 star systems, has been beaten by newcomers?" Counselor Morax swallowed hard and nodded his head. "The facts suggest this might be true, Your Majesty, and I think we should be very careful dealing with these creatures." The Emperor was about to yell at him when a guard ran into the throne room and announced that a human ship had just appeared in orbit around their planet. Emperor Valdrix felt a chill run through him because no alien ship had ever come to the home world before, and the fact that humans had arrived without being spotted by any defenses was very worrying. "Show me," he ordered, and a huge holographic display lit up in the middle of the room. The human who appeared was a man with dark hair and a friendly smile, and he was wearing a strange, colorful shirt covered with flowers and trees. "Hello, Emperor Valdrix," the human said cheerfully, like he was talking to an old friend instead of the ruler of a galactic empire. "I am Ambassador Daniel Kang from Earth, and I come in peace with an interesting offer for you." Behind the ambassador stood a young woman named Sophie Lim, who seemed to be fighting hard not to laugh, and her shoulders were shaking a little. Emperor Valdrix made himself look as big and scary as possible and spoke in his most commanding voice. "You have broken into Velthari space," he declared, "and you will give up your ship and face our justice, or suffer the results." Ambassador Kang tilted his head and smiled even bigger. "Yes, about that," he said in a friendly tone that ignored the threat completely. "We Got your first message about surrender and slavery and crushing our civilization, and I have. To say it was very dramatic stuff, Sophie Lim made a small squeaking sound and covered her mouth quickly. The thing is Ambassador. Kang continued, we did some research after meeting your fleet and learned some interesting things. He made his own holographic display appears showing Velthari technology compared to human technology side by side. Your strongest warship, he explained, has less brain power than the tablets human children used to play games. He pointed to another comparison showing their engines. Your fastest ship, he said, moves at about 1/10 the speed of our slowest ships, which are the ones we used to carry. Garbage's Sophie Lim lost her battle and let out a laugh that echoed through the throne room. Emperor Valdrix felt his scales turn a color that nobody had ever seen before, because nobody had ever embarrassed him like this. Your weapons, Ambassador, Kang went on, cannot scratch the paint on our passenger ships and your shields. Cannot even notice our weapons exist. He paused to let that sink in. This means if we wanted to blow up your entire fleet, we could do it in about 4 minutes without getting hurt at all. Throne room had gone completely silent, and every Velthari was staring at the display with shock and disbelief on their faces. Oh, here is what we suggest, Ambassador Kang said, and his smile became warmer and more real. We do not want to conquer you or destroy you or make you pay us money, because honestly, we have better things to do. What we want is to help you catch up with everyone else, because the galaxy is big and there might be other civilizations out there, and it would be better if we faced whatever comes. Together, Emperor Valdrix stared at the human in silence, because this was not how conquest worked. And nothing about this made any sense. You would share your knowledge with us, he finally asked in a voice that sounded uncertain for the first time in his life. Ambassador Kang nodded his head. We would teach you how to build ships that actually work, and weapons that can protect your people, and computers that can do more than basic math. In return, we only ask one thing, he added, and that is for you to stop conquering other species and start treating them like equals. Emperor Valdrix looked around at his advisors and guards and the skulls on his walls and realized that everything he believed about his empire and his power was wrong. The humans could destroy us whenever they want. Councillor Morax whispered with awe and fear in his voice. They could wipe us out and take everything, but instead they offer friendship. Emperor Valdrix turned back to the display where Ambassador Kang was waiting patiently with that friendly smile. Why, he asked in barely more than a whisper. Why would you help us when you could just take what you want? Ambassador Kang thought about it for a moment before answering. Because we spent thousands of years conquering each other, he said, and we learned it never ends well. We found out that working together beats fighting, and that helping others grow makes us stronger. He leaned forward and got more serious also. Being honest, conquering a galaxy full of people who are thousands of years behind us sounds really boring. Sophie Lim laughed again, and this time did not try to hide it. Emperor Valdrix felt something change inside him as he listened, and for the first time in his long life, he started to question everything he had been taught about power and ruling. The silence stretched on as the Emperor thought about his choices, and everyone waited to see what he would do. Finally, Emperor Valdrix did something no Velthari Emperor had ever done in all of history. He asked for time to think about it. News moved fast across the galaxy, and within a few weeks, every planet had heard the story of the strange newcomers who had laughed at the most feared empire in all of known space. The story spread through trade ships and radio signals in secret whispers between slaves who dared to hope that their long suffering might finally be ending. Commander Andrew Beak stood on the bridge of the ship Harmony as it flew toward the planet Sylphus, and he felt the weight of responsibility because the Sylthians had been slaves of the Velthari for over 8,000 years. The Sylthians were peaceful creatures that looked like tall, beautiful birds with shiny, colorful feathers and big, gentle eyes, and they had once been artists and thinkers before The Valkyrie crushed them. Lieutenant Jessica Wang was watching the radio channels as the ship came down through the clouds, and she saw something amazing happening below, Commander. She said with wonder in her voice, "There are millions of them gathering." In the main city, Commander Beak looked at the readings and saw she was right, because somehow the Scythians had learned a human ship was coming, and they had left their work and homes to wait in the streets when the Harmony landed in the big central square. The doors opened to show a sea of feathered faces stretching in every direction, and the sound that greeted the humans was like nothing they had ever heard. It was a song made of millions of voices singing together in a beautiful melody that spoke of hope and thanks and joy, and Commander Beak felt tears forming in his eyes. "They think we are gods, Lieutenant," Wang whispered as she watched the Scythians crying and singing and reaching toward the human ship. "We are not gods," Commander Beak replied firmly, because he knew such beliefs could be dangerous. "We are just humans who never stopped asking what if." An old Scythian pushed through the crowd and came to meet the humans with tears running down his feathered face, and he said his name was Elder Thalas, keeper of Scythian history. "For 8,000 years, he said in a shaking voice, we told stories about a day when someone would come to free us from the Valkyrie. Never really believed it would happen, but we kept telling the stories because hope was all we had left." Commander Beak got down on one knee so he could look the old bird creature in the eyes and spoke gently. "Your freedom is not a gift from us," he said, "because freedom cannot be given by others. It must be claimed by yourself. And we are only here to help you take back what was always yours on the other side of the galaxy." Similar things were happening on dozens of worlds as human ships arrived to help species that had been crushed by the Valkyrie for thousands of years on the planet Karath Prime, a world of creatures that looked like big smart bugs. Dr. Kevin Moon was leading a team of human builders who were tearing down the Valkyrie control towers. The Karath had been forbidden from making any technology beyond simple farm tools, and they watched in amazement as humans easily destroyed machines that had scared them for generations. "Are you doing this?" asked a young Karath named Clickaxe as he watched a human use a small handheld device to break apart a tower. Darmoon smiled and handed the device to the young bug creature. "This is called a quantum disruptor," he explained, "and it breaks the bonds holding the tower together." He showed Clickaxe how to use it and then stepped back to watch as the young Karath pointed it at another tower and pushed the button. The tower fell into a pile of dust, and Clickaxe stared at the device in his claws with pure wonder on his face. "You are giving this to us?" Clickaxe asked, because the Valkyrie had always kept technology secret to stay in control. Dr. Moon nodded and pulled out a computer tablet filled with basic science and building knowledge that humans had collected over centuries. "We are giving you everything," he said, "and we will teach you how to make your own tools and ships and future." Clicks clicked his mouth parts together, which Dr. Moon had learned meant very strong feelings. "Why?" the young creature asked, and it was the same question the Emperor had asked, and every species asked when they met humanity. "Because we spent centuries fighting each other," Dr. Moon replied, "and we learned it never makes anyone truly strong. Real strength," he continued, "comes from lifting others up and helping them grow and building something together that is bigger than any of us alone." All across the galaxy, the message spread, and species that had lived in fear for thousands of years started to believe change was possible. On the forest world Verdania, the tree-living Verdish people came out of hiding for the first time in 3 generations and met human visitors with flower chains and happy songs. On the water planet Aquarius, the underwater coral people rose from the deep places where they had been hiding and offered to share what they knew about ocean building with their new human friends. And on 100 other worlds, creatures of every shape and size looked up at the stars and saw something other than the shadow of Valkyrie control. They saw hope. Back on Silthus, Elder Thalas walked with Commander Beak through the city streets and pointed at buildings that used to be museums and theaters and schools before the Valtteri turned them into slave centers. We will rebuild them, Commander Beak promised, and we will help you find again. Everything that was taken, Elder Thalos stopped and turned to face the human with deep curiosity in his big eyes. You could have conquered us, the old Silthian said, and you could have just replaced the Valtteri as our masters, and we would have served you the same way. Commander Beak shook his head. That is not who we are, he said, and that is not why we came. We came to help you remember who you are and help you become who you were always meant to be, Elder. Thalos was quiet for a long moment, thinking about these words, and then he did something surprising. He laughed. It was a sound the Silthians had not made in 8,000 years, because laughing had been forbidden under Valtteri rule, and anyone caught showing joy was punished badly. But now, the old bird creature laughed, and the sound spread through the crowd like waves in water, and soon millions of Silthians were laughing together for the first time in living memory. Commander Beak watched as laughter filled the streets and rose into the sky, and he felt proud and purposeful in a way he had never felt before. This is what it means to be human, he thought to himself. Not to conquer and control, but to inspire and lift up and help others find their own strength. Lieutenant Wang appeared beside him and reported they were getting messages from dozens of other worlds asking for human help, and the requests were coming faster than they could answer. What do we do? She asked. Commander Beak smiled and looked out at the celebrating Silthians, who were dancing and singing and discovering joy for the first time in forever. We do what humans always do, he replied. We keep moving forward and help as many as we can and never stop believing tomorrow can be better than today. And so, humanity spread across the galaxy, not as conquerors, but as helpers and teachers and friends everywhere. They left behind not destruction and fear, but hope and laughter and the seeds of a better future. The universe was changing, and humanity was leading the way. 1 year had passed since humans first met the Valtteri Empire, and the galaxy had changed more in those 12 months than it had in the last 10,000 years. Admiral Grace Kim stood at the entrance to the Great Assembly Hall on Space Station Unity, which floated in empty space exactly between Earth and the Valtteri home world. The station was a wonder of teamwork, built by human builders and helpers from 47 different species, who used to be enemies or slaves or strangers to each other. Now they had come together to make something new, and the assembly hall was the heart of it all. Admiral Kim walked down the middle path and looked at all the different creatures filling the huge room and felt amazed at what humanity had helped create. The Silthians sat in one area with their shiny feathers catching the light and their big eyes bright with curiosity and hope. The Korath filled another section, and their clicking sounds made a constant background noise the humans had learned to find comforting. The Verdesh and the Coral people and crystal beings from the planet Prism and dozens of other species filled the remaining seats. Together, they showed more different kinds of life than humans had ever imagined could exist. In the back of the hall sat one figure that everyone noticed. Citizen Valdrix used to be Emperor Valdrix, the eternal ruler of the Valtteri Empire and conqueror of 3,000 star systems. Now he was just a regular citizen stripped of power by his own people. After everyone learned the truth about how far behind the Valtteri really were, the Valtteri had not handled it well at first, and there were riots and protests and demands for war against the humans, who had embarrassed them. But slowly the truth sank in, and the Valtteri realized their empire was built on lies and fear, and their supposed greatness was just an accident of timing. Citizen Valdrix had surprised everyone by accepting his fate calmly and admitting publicly that the humans had been right about everything. He had even asked to watch the first meeting of the Galactic Council, and Admiral Kim said yes because she believed everyone deserved a chance to change. Admiral Kim reached the speaking platform at the front and looked out at all the different creatures and felt how important this moment was. This was the first time in galactic history that so many species had gathered as equals. We did not come to the stars looking for an empire, she said, and her voice carried clearly through the silent room. We came because we were curious and could not stop asking questions, and because every time someone said something was impossible, some stubborn human said, "Watch me," wave of amusement passed through the crowd, because most species there had experienced human stubbornness over the past year. Valkyrie ruled through fear, Admiral Kim continued, and they kept you stuck in place because new ideas threatened their control. She paused and looked directly at Citizen Valdrix, who met her eyes without looking away. "But that time is over," she said, "and now we can build something better together." Commodore David Park sat with the human group next to Ambassador Daniel Kang and Dr. Thomas Shin and remembered that day. 1 year ago, when his bridge crew had laughed at the mighty Valkyrie Empire, so much had changed, but humans had stayed true to themselves. They had not conquered or controlled or demanded payment, and instead they had shared and taught and helped. And the galaxy had responded with thanks and friendship. Humanity offers something different, Admiral Kim said from the platform. We offer partnership and knowledge and the freedom to grow. She pointed toward Chief Engineer Michael Yoon, who sat nearby, and who had spent the whole year traveling from world to world, sharing human science with anyone who wanted to learn. Chief Engineer Yoon had trained thousands of alien scientists and builders, and many were already making their own discoveries. Based on what they learned, the Sylphians had created new music machines that mixed human sound technology with their ancient singing traditions. The Korath had figured out farming methods that grew 10 times more food using ideas from human scientists. Dozens of other species were making inventions and discoveries nobody could have predicted a year ago. "We are not your saviors," Admiral Kim said firmly, because she wanted everyone to understand. "We are just your neighbors who showed up late to the party." She smiled and added, "But we brought snacks, and we are happy to share." Laughter filled the room, and it brought tears to many eyes who remembered when laughter itself was forbidden. Seldor Thalas of the Sylphians stood up and spoke with strong emotion in his voice. "For 8,000 years we dreamed of freedom, and for 8,000 years we were told our dreams were foolish and we would always be slaves. But the humans showed us dreams can come true, and impossible just means not yet." He turned to Admiral Kim and bowed his head with respect. "We thank you," he said, "not for saving us, but for believing in us when we forgot how to believe in ourselves." One by one, creatures from other species stood to share their own stories of change and hope, and the meeting went on for hours as the galaxy spoke together for the first time. When the official part finally ended, Commodore Park found himself on a viewing deck with his original bridge crew around him, Lieutenant James Lee and Ensign Emily Cho, and Chief Engineer Yoon and Tactical Officer Rachel Han had all been promoted for their part in First Contact, but they still thought of themselves as the crew of the Resolute. They stood together looking at the stars and remembered that moment when they first met the Valkyrie fleet and could not stop laughing. "Can you believe it?" Lieutenant Lee said with wonder in his voice. 1 year ago, we were a boring patrol ship in the middle of nowhere, and now we are at the center of a whole galactic civilization. Ensign Cho shook her head and smiled. "I still cannot believe they thought they could conquer us, and I still cannot believe we ended up conquering them with kindness instead of guns." Commodore Park raised a glass he had brought from the celebration and made a toast to humanity. He said, "Too stubborn to be conquered, and too curious to stop exploring, and too amused to take bullies seriously." They drank together and laughed together, and then stood in comfortable quiet watching the stars. Somewhere out there were more civilizations waiting to be found, and more challenges waiting to be faced, and more impossible things waiting to be done. But for now, humans and their new friends would celebrate what they had built and dream about what came next. The galaxy was no longer a place of fear and control and conquest. It was a place of hope and teamwork and endless possibility. And it all started because some stubborn humans could not stop laughing at an emperor who thought he could not be beaten. Admiral Kim joined them on the viewing deck, and looked at the stars with satisfaction. "What happens next?" Commodore Park asked her admiral. Kin thought for a while before answering. "We keep doing what we always do," she said. "We keep asking questions and pushing limits and helping others find their own strengths." She turned to face her crew and smiled. "We keep laughing at anyone who says something is impossible." The crew of the Resolute raised their glasses one more time to the future, they said. "Together, and to whatever impossible things we do next." Outside the window, the stars seemed brighter, and somewhere far away, a new ship was launching on a new mission to explore the unknown. The humans were coming, and they brought laughter and hope, and a belief that tomorrow could always be better than today. The galaxy would never be the same, and that was exactly how humanity wanted it.